All right, our last speaker, Elliott Leonard. He was a former Domo consultant, but now he's a major Domo at Armis. He's going to be talking about a Domo Slack integration. He's really involved in the community. A lot of you probably know who he is, so it's going to be a really great presentation. I'm excited.
Awesome. Thanks, Anna. Yeah, super excited to be here. Let me just share my screen real quick, and hopefully, I'd love to answer questions as they come in. I'd also like it if Dan could just maybe answer all the questions for me. That'd be great too. But yeah, today we're going to talk a little bit about how, anytime I've used Domo, I've always seen that customers want to be alerted when changes happen, right? And they want to be alerted in the systems that they enjoy using. And so, we think of things like email, Slack, Microsoft Teams. And also, depending on our organization size, maybe not everybody has a Domo license, right? And so in this case, maybe they can't go and view cards and dashboards. And so we have to get a little more creative with how we share and distribute Domo data. And so in this case, I'm going to talk about 4 different ways that you can leverage Domo data as a messaging service. And I'm going to spend most of my time doing a demo on how you can do this data set alert via Slack integration. So this one I'm going to skip over real quick because we'll come back to that one later. The first method that I've seen that you can effectively share data with others is through a write-back connector. In this example here, Twilio is a text messaging product that lets you send text messages programmatically, as well as emails and other communications. And so Domo has a product called Integration Cloud that can allow you to create these write-back connectors that effectively takes Domo data sets, writes it back to another system. And in this case, with this example, you can actually drag it in as a magic ETL tile, right? So in this case, it can be pretty powerful. You can also create your own write-back connectors as well using their custom connector IDE. I've done that to create a couple. And I would say, while it's harder to set up, once you have it set up, it's very easy to maintain and very scalable too. So that's one way you can leverage your Domo data. Another way, as I go through these examples, they kind of progress from the easiest ones that are least customizable to the more complicated ones that are a little bit more code intensive. This next one is leveraging AWS, where basically you can send emails with Domo data to users outside your organization, right? So in this case, you can leverage AWS Lambda functions, which is where you can write serverless code, right? You can use your favorite coding language to write your own functions. And in this case, you can also, the jobs can be trigger based using assigned REST endpoints, or they can be cron jobs using AWS Event Bridge, right? So let's say you wanted to send emails every hour to a prospect or a customer. You can do that using this method here. This method here also leverages the Domo data API. And I talk a little bit about that in this last example here, where Domo has a bunch of APIs. I love using them. If you haven't been over to developer.domo.com yet, I highly recommend it. In this case, there is a dataset API, and as well as a SQL API where you can write and query your own data sets that are in Domo, and then you can use them to integrate into other products. And in this case, I usually use Postman as an API testing tool. So in this example here, I'm hitting a api.domo.com, and I'm hitting the dataset query API, where it lets me supply a SQL query and I can get back Domo data that then I can use in different systems. So with this example here, again, this is much higher code. And as we get you all into this instance, I have all these code examples here, so as well as demos, videos too. So with this one, I think maybe this Lambda one is the best example. But if you wanted to see how this works, right, you can click on this example. And I have, in this case, I built it in Node, but you can see how exactly you can trigger this. So I won't cover that too much. Again, love to get you into this instance so that you can take a look at this yourselves. I wanted to spend the bulk of the time around this Slack integration. This is by far the easiest method. Really, it's very low code. The only 2 requirements is you need a Domo instance, and then you also need to have a paid version of Slack so that you can use their tool called Slack Workflow Builder. The idea here is we're going to create a webhook action using a dataset alert, which is what Dan was talking about. And that dataset alert is going to then write to our Slack instance using a tool called Slack Workflow Builder. And this Workflow Builder accepts webhook requests. And so we're going to demo all this today. So basically, actually, let's just jump into it. In this example here, I'm going to come over here to my example data set. And this is going to be an NPS example, right? So Net Promoter Score. If I look at this data set here, it's very simple. We just have some IDs, dates that an NPS score comes in, and then a score from 1 to 5, with 1 being a poor score and 5 being a high score. And we want to say that we'd love to write this out to our Slack instance anytime we have a very low score. And so the way we'll do this is we're going to come over here to our alerts tab, and we're going to create a dataset alert. And so let's just call this, NPS score below 2. And we're going to configure this alert where anytime a row is added, we want to add a filter where if the score is less than or equal to 2, then we'd like to trigger the alert. And then we also need to give a column that identifies a row as unique, in this case, ID. And let's just have this only run once as soon as the dataset updates. Then we'll click next. And this is where the message gets configured, right? So in this case, we have a body. I'm just going to leave this all as default for now, but you can make this highly customizable according to your need. The last thing we're going to do here is we're going to attach an action, which is the webhook action. And so Dan talked a little bit about this, but if you aren't familiar with webhooks, it's really just a way for a system to communicate with another system via HTTP requests. And so in this case here, we're going to hook up our Slack instance to our Domo instance using these webhooks. And so now I'm going to come over to my Slack instance, and I'm going to come here. Again, if you have a paid version of Slack, this should work for you. You'll just come up to your tools section and you'll click Workflow Builder. And that'll bring up this Workflow Builder modal. And let's just create a new Workflow Builder. So we'll just click Create, and let's call this one NPS Score. And we'll click Next. And we're going to click this bottom one, Webhook Advanced, right? So this starts when an app or service sends a web request. And so we'll click Select. And the next thing we'll do is, this is wanting a JSON payload. And so in this case, we're going to add a variable. Anytime you're working with Domo, there is going to be a key called message that you'll add. And then there's also going to be a key called, I think it might be title, that we'll also add. And so in this case, this right here shows an example of how our JSON payload is going to look like, right? We'll have a message and we'll have a title. That's the title of the alert. And then we'll click Next. Right, so this is gonna start the integration. The next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna add a step where we're gonna send a message to a specific channel. And so in this case, let's click Add here. We're gonna send a message, and we'll send it to our Domo Alerts channel that we created. And then this part here is where we're gonna add in our Domo data, right? So our Domo data is gonna come in the message key of the JSON. And so we'll put the message in right there. And this kind of shows a little preview of how our app is going to look. And so we'll just click Save real quick. Again, very basic. You can make a lot more. You can make this a lot more complicated if you'd like to. But now we'll just click Publish. And this, now it has generated our custom or unique post request URL. And so now we'll copy this. And this is where we're going to come back to Domo. And we're going to paste this into our webhook action, right? So you can see it's this very long, complicated URL that's unique. The great thing here is I can actually send a test real quick to make sure that my integration is working, and it's not. And it's probably because I haven't published it. So let's see. Let's see, I think I've got to publish this real quick. Let's try that again real quick. Test failed. What is going on here?
Elliot, sorry to interrupt. It looks like the JSON payload that Domo is sending has name instead of title. I don't know if that could cause that failure.
Yep, that's going to be it. Thank you. Thanks, Dan. Dan saved the day. Yeah, let's go back into that real quick. For this purpose, actually, I'm just going to remove that real quick because we're probably not going to need that. We're just going to need the message. So I'm going to save that and publish these changes. And thank you, Dan. I appreciate that. Let's go back and try that one more time. Now we'll send that test successful. And so now if I come back to my instance, I can see that we have the NPS score right here. And just to make sure I can differentiate it, I'm going to come back here and add a just as a fun touch, I'm going to add in here a Domo logo. And let's save that real quick. Awesome. Cool. Right. So we have this. It's going to write data to our Domo alerts channel. And so let's just do a full test now. So let's save this and let's do some mock data. So I'm just going to edit this web form real quick and come here and let's add in a new row. And let's say we got a 1 MPS score. Let's click save and continue. And so now this is going to run the data set. And then if I come back here to my alerts, we can see that my MPS score alert was triggered. So if I come here, I can see that it got triggered. So now let's come back to our instance and we can see that we got a Domo alert coming in, right? So MPS score below 2, it's giving me all the data, right? So in this case, it could be, a customer name, show me the score. And that is kind of how you set up the integration. A couple things to note. I would just say, definitely, when you're doing this, it does just take a little bit of trial and error when you're setting up these alerts for the first time. Perfect example is me passing in the wrong key. One thing that I would recommend is I've seen this to be very powerful. The first time I used this integration, we had a use case where we had a bunch of customers. It was a SaaS company, so we had a lot of customers churning because they weren't paying their bills on time. And so in this case, we created this integration where anytime a customer was past due, it would figure out who the CSM was, the customer success manager, and then post it to the channel and tag the CSM saying, hey, your customer is past due. Go take a look at their Salesforce account. We linked their Salesforce account in it using a beast mode. And so that's a quick example of how you can use this and really tailor this to your unique needs. And the great thing is that this is all set up to go. If you have these two products, Domo and Slack, you could go and do this right now today, right? There's so many different ways you can do this. I think it's very powerful. And I know it went through that much more quickly than I was anticipating. So I'd love to take some questions too. Great question. So with Microsoft Teams, this can be done. If you're a Teams user, you'll just go to, I think there's a connectors or app store in the bottom left corner and you'll search webhooks. It's a little bit more complicated. I would say it definitely is a little bit, definitely more complicated than the Slack integration, but you can successfully do this with Microsoft Teams as well. Awesome. Any other questions? Great. Well, thanks everybody. Yeah. I just wanted to plug real quick. If you do have questions like this, we'd love to get you on our Slack Domo user group as well. Hopefully, Jay, if you're still here, if you could post that link, I'd love to help answer questions. Andy. So for example, right, Andy, if you, I know you're on the Slack group, please feel free to message me, right? I'd love to talk more about this integration. It does just take a little bit of tinkering. And so I would say, don't get frustrated if the first time it's not working. Please feel free. Yeah, thanks, Jay. Feel free to join us on our Slack community group. And, we love answering questions. I guess one note there is most of us aren't, I would say almost all of us aren't Domo employees. We're just customers who enjoy answering questions for each other. And so just keep that in mind with your questions, right? Try and keep it civil. But yeah, anyway, love to take any other questions if there are any. I guess what I meant by that is just remember, we're all customers here, right? So we're not support people per se.
Okay, great. Thank you, Elliot.